The shocking revelation that Steffy Forrester had crossed an unforgivable line with Liam Spencer before her sudden disappearance from Los Angeles shakes the foundation of the bold and the beautiful to its very core. For weeks, Steffy's absence had been explained as a much-needed escape, a way to heal from her fractured marriage, her mounting guilt, and her growing unease about Liam's unresolved attachment to Hope Logan. But as it turns out, her trip wasn't just about self-care. It was an attempt to hide from a truth too explosive to contain. Steffy is pregnant, and the father of her unborn child is Liam, the man she was supposed to be moving on from, the man who is now preparing to marry Hope. The revelation is set to ignite chaos throughout the Forrester, Logan, and Spencer families in a way no one can control. Everything begins with that single moment of weakness, one night where emotions, nostalgia, and temptation collided. Liam had come to Steffy's home under the pretense of offering comfort. Both of them were emotionally fragile, scarred by the endless cycle of betrayal and forgiveness that had defined their relationship for years. It was never supposed to happen again. Yet when their eyes met, memories overpowered logic. What began as a comforting conversation ended with a passionate encounter that would change all their lives. Steffy left town soon after, blaming exhaustion and the need for space. But deep down she knew she was running from the possibility that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Weeks later, as Liam and Hope begin to plan their future together, the clock runs out. Steffy's silence can no longer protect anyone. When she returns to Los Angeles, visibly shaken but determined, she knows what she must do. There is no easy way to say it, no way to soften the blow. She arrives unannounced at the Forrester estate, interrupting a joyful family dinner celebrating Hope and Liam's engagement. The air turns still when Steffy stands at the doorway, her expression haunted. And then, with trembling hands and a quivering voice, she admits the truth. She's pregnant, and the father is Liam. The room erupts into chaos. Hope's face drains of color as her engagement ring feels like a cruel joke, a symbol of a love that has been tainted once again by betrayal. Liam's eyes widen in disbelief, his entire world collapsing under the weight of his own guilt. He had tried to move forward, tried to convince himself that his night with Steffy meant nothing, but deep down he knew it would come back to haunt him. Now it has, in the most irreversible way imaginable. Ridge Forrester's anger boils over as he demands answers, while Brooke Logan, ever the defender of her daughter, confronts Liam for betraying Hope yet again. What was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings transforms into a battlefield of accusations, heartbreak, and shattered dreams. For Steffy, returning to face the consequences is both an act of courage and desperation. She knows her confession will destroy lives, but she also knows that continuing to hide would be far worse. The guilt of carrying Liam's child in secret has eaten away at her sanity, and the burden of deceit has become unbearable. The moment she speaks the words aloud, a strange mix of relief and dread washes over her. She has done the right thing, but at what cost? Hope's heartbreak is raw and unfiltered. After years of forgiving Liam, of watching him waver between her and Steffy, she had finally believed that their love had won, that this time she would be enough. The wedding plans, the dreams of a future family, The fragile happiness she had allowed herself to feel all crumble in an instant. She looks at Liam, searching for an explanation, but all she sees is regret. His apologies mean nothing now. The wound is too deep, the betrayal too familiar. Hope realizes that every time she believed in him, she set herself up for another heartbreak. And yet, as much as she wants to hate him, a part of her still loves him, and that is the cruelest part of all. Liam, torn between guilt and responsibility, faces an impossible decision. He knows that the right thing to do is to stand by Steffy and their unborn child, but his heart is still tethered to hope. Once again, he is trapped in the emotional triangle that has defined his life, and this time, there may be no way out. The pregnancy changes everything. It's not just a question of love anymore. It's about honor, accountability, and the future of their families. Every choice he makes will have devastating consequences for someone he cares about. As the days unfold, the fallout spreads through Los Angeles like wildfire. News of Steffy's pregnancy quickly becomes the topic of gossip at Forrester Creations. Ridge tries to protect his daughter, but even he cannot ignore the damage her actions have caused. Brooke, meanwhile, goes to war for Hope, vowing that Liam will never again be allowed to hurt her daughter. The rivalry between the Forresters and the Logans flares up once more, reopening old wounds and reigniting decades-old tensions. What began as a private scandal turns into a public spectacle that threatens to destroy reputations and careers alike. Steffy, feeling increasingly isolated, begins to question whether returning to Los Angeles was a mistake. Everywhere she goes, she is met with judgmental stares and whispered conversations. She wanted to take responsibility for her actions, but she hadn't expected to become the town's villain. The guilt is crushing, but the maternal instinct growing inside her forces her to keep fighting. She vows to protect her baby, even if it means facing the wrath of everyone she loves. Yet the deeper truth is that she still loves Liam, and that love, no matter how toxic or forbidden, continues to haunt her. Hope, on the other hand, spirals into emotional chaos. Every corner of her life reminds her of Liam. She throws herself into work at Forrester Creations, determined to regain control, but her heart refuses to cooperate. The dreams of marriage and motherhood she had built around Liam collapse into bitterness and self-doubt. For the first time, she begins to question her own judgment, why she kept forgiving him, why she believed his promises, why she allowed herself to be caught in a cycle that only ever led to heartbreak. Brooke urges her daughter to walk away for good, to rebuild her life without Liam. But Hope's emotions are too tangled to untangle overnight. The war between logic and love rages inside her, threatening to consume her completely. Meanwhile, Liam tries to reconcile his conscience with his choices. The weight of what he's done crushes him daily. He wants to be a good man, a good father. But every step he takes seems to lead him deeper into ruin. His relationship with Hope is shattered, and his connection to Steffy is poisoned by guilt. Every time he looks at her, he sees both the woman he loves and the reminder of his greatest mistake. And yet, when he hears the baby's heartbeat for the first time, something changes inside him. Responsibility takes hold. He knows he cannot run from this. He must face the consequences, no matter how painful they may be. As the weeks pass, tension builds toward an emotional reckoning. Steffy's pregnancy becomes impossible to ignore, both physically and symbolically. The child growing inside her represents not only the bond between her and Liam, but also the endless cycle of love and betrayal that has plagued all three of them. Everyone at Forrester Creations senses that the storm is far from over. The press begins circling, eager for scandal, and rumors start to threaten the company's public image. Ridge worries that the family's legacy will suffer, while Brooke uses the situation to question Steffy's leadership. The corporate and personal worlds collide, turning the love triangle into a power struggle that stretches far beyond matters of the heart. In a desperate bid to regain control, Hope decides to break her silence publicly. She organizes a Forrester press event, determined to show the world that she will not be defined by Liam's betrayal. But her strength only masks her pain. As cameras flash and journalists swarm, she stands tall, announcing that she will be stepping away from both her engagement and her work, not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her dignity. The crowd applauds, but behind the scenes, her heart is breaking. Liam watches helplessly as the woman he loves walks away, knowing that he has no one to blame but himself. Steffy, too, is devastated. This isn't what she wanted. She never meant to destroy Hope's happiness or her own chance at redemption. Yet no matter how hard she tries, the consequences of her actions cannot be undone. The unborn child binds her to Liam forever, a constant reminder of the night that changed everything. As the curtain falls on this chapter, the bold and the beautiful leaves fans reeling. The story of Steffy, Liam, and Hope is far from over. Each character stands at a crossroads, torn between love, guilt, and the desire for forgiveness. The path ahead promises heartbreak, redemption, and perhaps even more shocking revelations. For now, one truth remains certain. No secret in Los Angeles stays buried forever, and when it comes to love and betrayal, the past always finds a way to return. Finn's world shatters the moment the words leave Steffy's lips, not in an explosion, but in a brutal, clinical silence that feels like a hospital corridor after the alarms stop. The kind of silence that makes every breath sound like a trespass. He hears the confession and recognizes, with the precision of a surgeon and the heartbreak of a husband, that nothing he can stitch together will restore what she has torn, because this time she crossed a sacred threshold and dragged their vows over it. And the betrayal does not end at the body, but contaminates the trust that kept their home upright for Hayes, for Kelly, for the fragile hope he guarded for them both. He cannot forgive, not because he is vindictive, but because forgiveness requires a living foundation, and Steffy hammered through theirs when she chose Liam. And he knows that if he stays and pretends, he will be teaching their son that love tolerates carelessness, that family is elastic enough to accommodate an open door for weakness. And Finn refuses to make that lesson permanent. What cuts deepest is not just the act, but the pattern, that Steffy did not value the quiet, faithful love he poured into every day, that she mistook steadiness for complacency and history for destiny, that she let muscle memory steer her back to a man whose gravity has already collapsed entire futures. And Finn will not let that gravity claim Hayes, because a child deserves a center, that does not wobble when old temptations whisper, so he moves with clear intent, setting aside the agony long enough to begin documenting, consulting, building the frame of a custody case that relies not on rage, but on facts, on messages, on timelines, on photos, on the admissions Steffy gave him unprompted. And he warns himself not to drown in bitterness when the law demands precision. He calls a family attorney recommended by a colleague who has guided physicians through divorces where professional schedules, emergency shifts, and parental responsibilities collide. And he lays it all out. The marriage, the expectation of fidelity, the night Steffy disappeared into a blur of mixed signals and lingering attachment, the return, the confession, the pregnancy rumors that now color every room at Forrester Creations, the implication that Liam's orbit will become a permanent fixture in any home where Hayes sleeps, and the attorney listens, clinical and attentive, asking about routine, schooling plans, pediatric checkups, sleep schedules, attachment cues, because custody turns on stability and continuity and proof of judgment, not just on clean anger. Finn gathers the evidence, carefully text threads that show emotional detachment in the days before the betrayal, her travel receipts, the late-night door camera footage timestamped in a way that undercuts her initial explanations, the voicemail to a confidant where she conceded she made a reckless choice and feared what it would do to her family, and he knows that none of it will undo his pain. But all of it will matter when a judge weighs what is healthiest for Hayes, and that health is not measured in designer nurseries or glossy apologies at press events, but in consistency, sobriety of decision-making, and an environment free of volatility. He calls Lee, and the conversation is both a confession and a vow. Because his mother understands the surgical necessity of boundaries, she tells him that history is a stubborn infection if you do not irrigate the wound thoroughly. And he promises her that he will not let his son's life be dictated by the aftershocks of Steffy and Liam's unfinished story, that Hayes will not be made a spectator to romantic whiplash, that he will not wake to hear names argued in whispers behind doors. At Forrester Creations, the fallout gallops ahead of Steffy's attempts to control narrative. And no matter how Steffy drafts memos about refocusing on collections and brand identity, cameras and gossip are drawn to the scandal's heat. And Finn watches the headlines twist love into spectacle while he composes a parenting plan with relentless calm, detailing weekday caretaking aligned with his shifts, trusted childcare coverage vetted by Lee, pediatric appointments scheduled months ahead, a co-parenting app to timestamp exchanges with geo-confirmations. Every safeguard designed to keep friction from touching Hayes. He knows courts do not punish infidelity in the abstract, but they do consider judgment. And he is disciplined enough to separate the moral wrong from the legal leverage, to point out that Steffy's choice to step back into entanglement with Liam creates a lattice of conflict that will destabilize routines. That mixed signals spill into childcare pickups and drop-offs, that media swarms have already invaded a private driveway, that a triangle resurrected becomes a carousel no child should ride. Ridge barges into the conversation with paternal thunder, insisting that family fixes family. But Finn does not flinch because the time for grand speeches has passed. Because a father's job is not to manage adult egos, but to secure a child's ground, and he tells Ridge respectfully, plainly that leadership at a fashion empire does not qualify anyone to referee Hayes' bedtime. That family name does not supersede a father's responsibility to shield his son from turbulence. And the message lands cold. Brooke, looking at the political map, urges Hope to disentangle from Liam's chaos, and the irony is not lost on anyone that while Hope recalibrates her heart, Finn tightens his case with a surgeon's knot. He meets with a child psychologist to preemptively design a transition plan that limits disruption, that staggers overnights, that frames explanations in age-appropriate language and eliminates blame from any script Hayes might overhear, because Finn intends to win custody without weaponizing Hayes' love for his mother. And that resolve, kind and immovable, becomes the spine of everything he does. Steffy, meanwhile, tries to mount a defense in the only way she knows, with contrition dialed up to the public register and declarations that she will do better, that she made a mistake, that her love for Hayes eclipses every misstep. And though Finn believes she loves their son, love alone is not the metric the court will rely on. So when he receives an offer for joint physical custody with generous flexibility and vaguely defined boundaries around new romantic contact, he declines, proposing instead a structure that keeps Hayes primarily with him until Steffy demonstrates sustained stability free of Liam-induced crises. And he insists on behavioral guardrails, no unannounced visits from Liam during Hayes' time with Steffy, no co-sleeping arrangements where romantic partners blur parental lines, no media-invited narratives that place Hayes on a stage. He anticipates how this will be painted, that he is punishing Steffy, that he is exploiting a mistake, and he refuses to be baited, speaking only through filings and calmly documented exchanges, because every emotional outburst would erode the credibility he needs to maintain. Liam tries to insert himself as a peacemaker, a pattern so familiar it is practically a reflex. But Finn's boundaries are steel, and he communicates through counsel that discussions about Hayes occur only between parents or their legal representatives. That triangulation is over, that old habits have no jurisdiction here. The first hearing arrives, and the courtroom feels like a pressure chamber. Reporters filling benches, as if this were a quarterly earnings call for heartache, and Finn sits with his attorney, his tie straight, his file tabbed, his expression unreadable except for the quiet that surrounds people who have decided on a single path and burned all the side roads. Steffy's counsel argues that one mistake cannot erase a mother's bond, that Hayes thrives with both parents, that punishing a consensual lapse with restricted custody is draconian. And Finn's attorney answers with a methodical narrative, not punishment but prevention, not moralism but management of foreseeable risk. A demonstration that Steffy's choice has already triggered PR intrusions, workplace distractions, schedule volatility, and Liam's re-entry into daily logistics, all of which make stable routines fragile, while Finn has implemented a robust, documented framework that insulates Hayes from adult turbulence. The judge listens, stone-faced, requesting evidence instead of adjectives, and Finn's side produces copies of the door footage, the recorded admission transcribed and authenticated, the co-parenting app proposals, the childcare background checks, the pediatrician's letter attesting to Finn's consistency, the child psychologist's plan prioritizing attachment security in the hallway after. Steffy approaches with eyes raw, insisting that she is more than her worst night, that Finn once promised to see her whole, and the tragedy is that he still does. He sees the fierce mother, and the brilliant executive, and the woman who fought her demons. But he also sees choices that reroute a child's fate. And that is where his answer cannot move. He will not let Hayes live at the mercy of a romantic saga that keeps rewriting itself whenever nostalgia flares. Back at home, Finn replaces photographs selectively, not to erase Steffy but to reduce triggers, keeping images where Hayes is smiling in both arms, but moving couple shots to a drawer. Because he refuses to teach erasure, he calls Kelly's guardians to coordinate sibling time that feels organic and protected. Because Hayes' sister should not become collateral in an adult war, he times his shifts to be home during anchor hours, breakfast and bedtime. He places baskets with labeled toys and routines that replicate across rooms so Hayes feels continuity no matter which area of the townhouse he explores. He keeps promises small and keeps them all. The currency of trust that children understand better than speeches. When the interim order lands, it reflects the argument's spine. Finn is granted temporary primary physical custody with a structured visitation schedule for Steffy. Conditions attached to limit third-party, romantic presence and protect Hayes from media exposure. And a review set for months ahead contingent on compliance and demonstrated stability. The order does not gloat, and neither does Finn. Because no victory exists in a landscape where a family has been injured, but relief washes over him like an anesthetic that finally reaches the nerve. And he uses that clarity to extend olive branches that put Hayes first. He proposes weekly video calls during Steffy's off days. He agrees to family therapy to model respectful communication. He offers neutral exchange locations that keep paparazzi at bay. Steffy reels, vowing to rebuild and furious at the legal stamp on her failure. But even her anger curdles into determination, and Finn silently hopes she succeeds, not for the sake of old love, but for the boy who loves her laugh. Ridge unleashes a campaign to rehabilitate his daughter's image. Brooke counters to protect Hope from any renewed triangulation. Liam wavers between apology scripts and familiar stupors of self-examination, but Finn does not waver. He charts days like care plans, crisp, compassionate, repeatable. And Hayes responds in the way children do when the ground is steady. He plays longer, sleeps deeper, seeks reassurance less often. And Finn files those small miracles in the ledger he will carry into the review when accusations inevitably surface that he used evidence of adultery to wound rather than to protect. He answers only by returning to the principle at the heart of the case, that choices have externalities, and when those externalities risk a child's routine and peace, a parent must establish a firewall. That he did not manufacture Steffy's act nor publicize it, but he could not permit it to metastasize into Hayes' daily life. He tells the court-appointed evaluator the truth with no varnish, that he still admires much of Steffy, that he mourns what they might have been, that he will not weaponize Hayes' love against her, that he will supervise the earliest transitions himself if that reassures everyone, that he will never teach Hayes to speak about his mother with anything but respect. The evaluator notes the absence of rancor and the presence of routine. The anchored calm that layers over a home when someone refuses to let chaos set the clocks. Steffy works her program of repair therapy time, an operational firewall between herself and Liam. A demonstrable retreat from old patterns in the months move like reluctant clouds. Finn documents and encourages, protective yet fair, a tireless sentinel for Hayes' right to grow in a climate of reliability. When the review hearing arrives, he is ready to accept calibrated expansions if the data supports them. Because custody is not a trophy but a thermostat, to be adjusted as conditions stabilize, whatever the court orders next. Finn has already drawn the line that matters most. He will not let his son live under the shadow of a love story that confuses familiarity with fate. He will keep Hayes' sky as clear as discipline and tenderness can make it. And he will measure every decision by its impact on the small boy who trusts him to hold the world still. Steffy's betrayal remains a scar he will not pretend away, and he will not forgive on demand or return to a marriage that has been compromised beyond repair. But he will stand at every exchange with civility. He will answer every late-night call about fevers with calm. He will send photos of first without being asked. He will build a family that looks different from the dream he once had and nonetheless meets the only standard that matters. A child who knows that adults can fail each other without failing him. In that resolve is the message to everyone circling the wreckage, from Forrester boardrooms to Spencer offices to the bright lights of the press. This is where the spectacle ends, where evidence stops being a headline and becomes a quiet shield, where a father chooses constancy over theater, where Hayes' tomorrow will not be drafted by yesterday's impulses. Finn will not let go of that. He will not let Steffy's lapse become Hayes' lesson. And if the cost is a marriage that cannot be resuscitated, he pays it and keeps steady, because some lives depend on a heart that refuses to waver.